I need to say this clearly before anything else. I am not schizophrenic. I have never been diagnosed with psychosis. I do not hear voices in the way people mean when they say that. What I hear is not random, not chaotic, not cruel. It waits. And it only speaks when I am quiet enough to listen. I used to believe everyone had something like this, a second stream of awareness, a private narrator. But there is a difference between a thought and a response. And once you hear the difference, you can never unhear it. First awareness, it is not a thought. The first time I noticed it wasn't a thought was when it disagreed with me. I was 9 years old, sitting alone in my room while rain tapped against the window in slow, uneven rhythms. My parents were downstairs, arguing again. Low voices, sharp pauses, the sound of a glass set down too hard. I remember thinking, if I stay quiet, they might forget I'm here. And something inside me replied, they won't. Not as an idea, not as an assumption, as a statement. I remember the feeling more than the sound, a sudden stillness like the air in the room had thickened. I whispered, what? Nothing answered, but something had already changed. Because thoughts don't surprise you. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying it again and again. I tried to recreate it. I thought words deliberately, carefully. Say it again, prove you're real, silence. Just as I began to relax, the voice returned, softer this time. You don't call, you wait. I didn't sleep after that. Childhood hints, the quiet companion, the voice didn't become my friend. It didn't introduce itself. It didn't comfort me. It observed. Sometimes it corrected me. If I reached for the stove when my mother wasn't looking, it said, too hot, you'll scar. If I wandered too far from home, it warned, turn back now. And I always did. Not because I was afraid, because it was always right. I learned something important early on. The voice never spoke about feelings. It spoke about outcomes. At 11, I fell off my bike and split my lip open. As I lay on the pavement, tasting blood, I thought, I'm gonna cry. The voice responded, you won't. Someone is watching. I swallowed the pain. A stranger helped me up moments later. At 12, I asked myself why I couldn't remember my early childhood. No first steps, no first words, no birthdays before a certain age. The voice answered, those memories were removed. I laughed it off. Children imagine things. But the voice didn't laugh with me. It never laughed. Adolescence, the rules form. By the time I was a teenager, patterns had emerged. The voice only spoke when I was alone. It never spoke over other sounds. It never repeated itself. And most importantly, it never asked questions. It already knew the answers. At 16, my friend Daniel invited me to sneak out late one night. I stood by my window, 1 foot already outside, heart pounding with excitement. I thought, this will be fine. The voice replied immediately, you'll regret it. Why? I asked silently. There was a pause, longer than usual. Then, because you won't be the one who gets hurt. I stayed inside. The next morning, I learned Daniel had been hit by a car while crossing the road. He survived, but he never walked properly again. That was the first time I realized the voice wasn't guessing. It wasn't predicting. It was remembering something I didn't know yet. Adulthood confirmation. I'm 26 now. I live alone. I work nights. I avoid crowds, not out of fear, but because noise drowns it out. The voice has grown clearer with age, stronger, less patient. The moment that confirmed everything happened in my bathroom, under harsh fluorescent light. I was brushing my teeth, half asleep, watching my reflection when the voice said, without warning, you look different from how I remember. I froze. I didn't ask anything, I whispered. The reflection in the mirror seemed delayed. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to feel wrong. Who are you talking about? I asked. The voice replied, me. My heart pounded. That doesn't make sense. The voice waited, then said, it didn't then either. The voice reveals knowledge it should not have. After that, it started crossing boundaries. It mentioned things before I discovered them, before anyone could. One night, lying in bed, the voice said, you were operated on. I sat up. What? At birth, and again later. I laughed nervously. I don't have any scars. A pause. You weren't cut where you could see. The next day, I requested my medical records. I expected nothing. I found inconsistencies. Dates that didn't align. Procedures marked non-invasive with anesthesia listed. A neurological consult signed by a department that no longer exists. That night, I asked the question I had avoided my entire life. What are you? The answer came slowly. Carefully. I'm the part of you that remembers before the division. The disturbing evidence, never whole. The final proof came from my birth certificate. Most of it was normal. But buried deep in the delivery notes, hidden in clinical language, I found something that made my vision blur. Cognitive outcome, stabilized. Secondary imprint, isolated. Integration, deferred. Deferred, not canceled, not resolved. My hands were shaking when I asked the voice one last question. Why do I feel incomplete? The voice didn't answer immediately. When it did, its tone was almost gentle. Because you are. That night, lying in the dark, I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like something pressing forward, testing the limits of where it was allowed to exist. The voice spoke one final time before silence swallowed it again. You were never meant to be the whole person. You were meant to be the part that could live. And for the first time in my life, I understood why the voice never called me by my name. The shadow between thoughts, the whispering world. After the first confirmation, life didn't return to normal. Noise never felt safe again. Crowds, music, even the hum of electricity, everything threatened to drown the voice out. And yet it did not remain quiet. It slipped into spaces it shouldn't. Rooms I hadn't entered in years, memories I thought forgotten, moments I hadn't lived, not yet. I began to wonder, was I living at all, or only moving through the edges of what it allowed me to see? The voice becomes insistent. At first, it was hints. You are not alone. Look behind you. I brushed them off. Then the intrusions became specific. You left the stove on. I had checked it twice. Your friend lied. Daniel hadn't texted me, but he was lying. You are being watched now. I felt eyes everywhere. In mirrors, in shadows, in the street. Whenever I reached for my phone, it stopped me. Don't, they're waiting. I couldn't tell if it meant danger or truth, but I obeyed. Always. Escalating paranoia. The house feels alive. I moved into a new apartment. I wanted silence, but the voice followed. Doors creaked when I wasn't near them. Lights flickered in patterns, sometimes words. Shapes formed in the walls. They're listening. They know what you remember. At night, my shadow no longer felt like mine. It lagged behind me. I tried to leave. The voice followed me into the streets, into faces of strangers, into reflections, car windows, puddles, glass. The voice demands attention. One morning it wouldn't stop. Not whispers, commands. Stand still. Watch. Wait. I stopped sleeping. Dreams blended with waking life. It showed me memories that weren't mine. Remember this, it said, as I watched myself in places I had never been, talking to people I had never met. The invisible observer, I began leaving only at night. Footsteps followed me, not matching mine. When I ran, the voice was calm. You cannot outrun yourself. I realized then it wasn't guiding me, it was preparing me. Unraveling reality, the mirror test. One night, I confronted it. I stood before the bathroom mirror. Show me what you are. The reflection flickered. I saw myself, but wrong. A version that smiled when I didn't, spoke without sound. Do you see? It said. You are not the only one. The reflection spoke. You are breaking, and you like it. Partial revelation. The inevitable truth, finally, it whispered, almost kindly. You are the remainder. The fragment that survived. I understood. I had never been whole. And soon, it said, you will remember why. The air pulsed, reality bent, the voice became everything, and my universe followed. Subscribe for more.